Attention, please. We're ready to begin. Today's date is April 25th, 2023, and this is a meeting of the Senate Committee on Environmental Quality. Madam Secretary, will you please call the roll?
Senator Price? Here. Present. Senator Duplessis? Here. Present. Senator Hewitt? Present. Senator Hinchkins? Senator Lambert?
Here.
Present. Senator Pope? Present. Senator Connick? Present. 6.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. There are 6 members present and a quorum. First, a few announcements before we get started. If you have a cell phone, please silence it. If you need to take a call, please step outside of the committee room. Those of you who wish to give testimony, please fill out a witness card completely, sign it, and hand it to our Sergeant at Arms. Your signature is an affirmation that the testimony you give is true. Green striped cards are for support, red striped cards are in opposition, and white cards are for information purposes only. First thing we have the minutes from the last meeting. We have of April 18, 2023. Is there a motion? Senator Pope moves to approve the minutes of the April 18, 2023 meeting. Is there any opposition? No opposition. The minutes are approved. The first bill we're going to hear is Senate Bill 62 by Senator Facey. All right. Senator Facey, if you can, or he's on. Okay. Go ahead and proceed. Yeah, you should be. Now,
It was.
try it.
Now we got it.
You-
Now we got it.
Got it. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, committee members. Bill SB 62 is to deal with pipelines, which kind of my background. I've been in pipeline business for over 30 years, so it was brought to my attention that we could try to fix a few little problems in some of the reporting. And basically what SB 62 does is right now they got to report to 3 state agencies, and this kind of takes the Louisiana State Police kind of out of it a little bit. We will have an amendment discussing it with the Louisiana State Police. They want to put one little amendment on between here and the floor. They're just kind of working out the details with us right now. And so other than that, the bill basically takes the state police, kind of getting them where they don't have to go out and do the investigations and everything. So I have Trey Hill here to kind of explain exactly, exactly what the situation is.
Thank you, Senator Facey. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee.
Mr. Hill, if you could just state your name and everything for the record.
Trey Hill, and I'm representing Athens Energy today. So I just want to provide a quick synopsis of some historical relevance for Senate Bill 62. When Louisiana first put its underground damage prevention law in place in 1988, no agency was regularly enforcing the provisions of the law. I'm trying to just, in my own mind, somewhere around 2000, I think it is, estimating state police became active in enforcing the damage prevention with respect to only hazardous material pipelines, which is covered in the right to know law. So in 2017, this legislature amended the DIG law and granted exclusive enforcement of the DIG law with respect to hazardous material pipelines to the Office of Conservation within DNR, which includes our state's Office of Pipeline Safety. So if you hear me mention DNR, Office of Conservation, Office of Pipeline Safety, they're all within they're all in DNR. So our Office of Pipeline Safety has complete regulatory authority over intrastate and distribution pipeline operations, except for rates and customer service, which all fall under the jurisdiction of the PSC. Interstate pipelines are regulated by the Federal Office of Pipeline Safety under the Hazardous Material Safety Administration and FERC. And you'll hear me talk about PHMSA as the Pipeline Hazardous Material Safety Administration. So when our OPS became the enforcing agency for damage prevention in 2017, the need for regulatory oversight by LSP, by Louisiana State Police, was no longer applicable, because anything the industry reports to them under the right to know provisions also gets reported to Office of Pipeline Safety. So I do want to stress that we, excuse me, that we owe state police a debt of gratitude for them doing the best job that they could with something that's not necessarily in their wheelhouse, so to speak, enforcing our dig laws with respect to the pipelines. They were the only agency willing to accept responsibility for moving our damage prevention program forward and providing for the safety of our citizens and the communities that the industry serves. And so they do have another important role, and that role is that of an emergency responder. And that role is not diminished by this bill. We've been engaged in dialogue with them to figure out ways that we can collaborate better to enhance our common objectives of improving public safety. And I do want to mention that the vast majority of incidents that first responders respond to are responded to by local fire departments. We did have a meeting, as Senator Fazy said, yesterday with state police. They had some concerns that we would not call the hazardous material hotline with this amendment. I assured them that Office of Pipeline Safety would require us to call that hotline. When we call that hotline, not only are state police notified, but also DEQ and DNR get notification for us making that one call. We don't want to do away with that. We want to be able to call one number and have DNR and DEQ notified as well. So nothing with our reporting requirements to DEQ or DNR are changed with this bill. And again, we agreed to work with them on an amendment between here and the floor to see how we can best accommodate that. And with that, I'd be more than happy to answer any questions.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Hill and Senator Facey. I don't see any questions. We have in support of the bill, Larry Harris is present and support but does not wish to speak. Kathleen Harris, MD, is present and support, does not wish to speak. Trey Hill, of course, is present and wishes to speak and did just testify. And Rodney Braxton, present with CenterPoint Energy, is present and support, does not wish to speak. James DeSherry, CenterPoint Energy, is present and in support, but does not wish to speak. And also we have Carl Weber with Atmos Energy is present and will provide information if requested. All right. Let's see. Those opposed is Mason or Morgan Shannon. Looks like Power Coalition is present in opposition but does not wish to speak. Reverend James Vanderweek, Greater New Orleans Interfaith, is present in opposition, does not wish to speak. Jack Reno Sweeney, Louisiana Bucket Brigade, is present and opposition, does not wish to speak. Scott Evestus, Healthy Gulf, is present and would like to speak. Mr. Evestus, if you'd please come forward. If y'all could let Mr. Evestus have the table.
Hello, my name is Scott Eustace. I'm the Community Science Director for Healthy Gulf. And speaking in my role, often we are called by residents from natural gas pipeline incidents. And speaking in opposition to 62, we have a lot of pipelines. Louisiana has the highest rate per mile of natural gas pipeline incidents in the nation. Our rate of accidents is 6 times the national rate. It's only exceeded by the leaks we have offshore. So we have a lot of residents who aren't informed. They try to get the information from state police, LDEQ, LDNR, and fail, and they call me in the middle of the night wondering if they need to evacuate their children. We prefer the committee take up a law that strengthens protections. And what we provide to residents is the New Jersey hazardous materials fact sheet for the methane releases. Methane, of course, is highly flammable. In an industrial setting, it can also cause frostbite, but mostly it's an asphyxiant and has a lot of co-pollutants that are also released during the event. It's oil and gas, right? That's what my grandfather would remind me. Even in a gas transmission pipeline, there are trace amounts of chemicals like benzene, formaldehyde, and hydrogen sulfide, especially for the industrial transmission pipelines under consideration. All respect to LDNR, they're not usually on scene. It's usually the fire department or state police that residents try to contact, try to get information on whether or not they should evacuate. And, we step into the gap. We're contemplating many more gas transmission pipelines in Louisiana, about 13 mega pipelines coming to the state. It doesn't seem, we're less of an oil and gas producer, and we're more of the trading floor. So any legislation exempting companies from out of state for requirements is only going to be a loser for people who actually have to breathe in Louisiana. So while this bill might be good for the clients that Pipeline Construction and Maintenance Incorporated is seeking, it's not good for any of us who live here. So thank you.
Thank you. All right. Terrence Gwynn is present and in opposition, but does not wish to speak. Chanel Levine, Rise St. James, present, but is in opposition, does not wish to speak. Morgan Shannon, Power Coalition, New Orleans, present, in opposition, does not wish to speak. Kathy Wascom with Lean is present and would like to speak. Ms. Wascom, if you could come forward, please.
I'll be brief. Kathy Wascom, Louisiana Environmental Action Network. Throughout the years, we have worked to get citizens informed as to what's going on in their community. The right to know legislation is extremely important to us and those who work with citizens in the community that may experience, as the other gentleman says, their odors, their things that are happening, and no one seems to be able to know what's going on. So to eliminate this, the state police from a right to know is what I think would be a mistake. I have not talked to state police to see what their amendment is, but I thought at one point there was the agents, the pipelines or the plants or whatever wanted to have one number to call to report everything as they try to deal with a disaster. But state police should, I believe, still be a part of the people that you contact when you have an incident. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Wascom. Next, we have President would like to speak is General Russell Honore. General Honore, if you could come up, please.
Russell Honore 14443 Memorial Tower Drive, Baton Rouge. I had an experience about 10 months ago, right off Nicholson Drive, out by where the new casino is. A lady called me from the subdivision there. There was a loud noise coming from from a pipeline. And it ended up being the release valve. The local St. George Fire showed up. They didn't know much was going on. State police showed up, or traffic police. It took some time and eventually entirely Highway 31 was shut down. We got pipelines all over, even near our schools. I strongly recommend to the committee that we not advance this bill because of the amount of pipelines we have, and we don't have a state or federal standard like we have on many things that say when these pipelines should be replaced. Many of them are only replaced when they break. We are not Arkansas and we ain't Mississippi. We've got more pipelines than any other state. And I ask you to be conscious of that to protect our people. We really don't have a big rule on how far a pipeline can be from a school where our children go to school. This would be adding risk. And this state has fought hard to protect our right to know. That right to know, to inform people of what's going on and where the pipelines are. And much of our communities, and not just rural parishes like St. Charles, they rely on volunteer fire departments or the first responders along with the sheriffs. So I ask you that the committee seriously take a look at why we need this and who are we doing it for, because of the density of pipelines and the dangerous things that can happen with pipelines, that we do not lessen this and we do not challenge our own state law that the right to know, and that not only we not do this, but we need to strengthen our rules so the local first responders, in many cases, which are sheriffs and or city police in Baton Rouge, and the volunteer fire department know where those pipelines are and what's in them. There's no requirement now for them to do that. So we ask you to consider that as you vote on this bill, and please, let's keep safety as #1 priority. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, General Honoré. And that appears to be all the people that were in opposition. Senator Connick, I see you have a question. Is that directed to who?
That's for the state police and for Senator Fessy.
All right, if we have anybody here from the state police. All right, and Senator Fessy, could you come on up? All right, Senator Connick. First of all, if y'all could identify yourselves for the record, please.
Frank Bason, Louisiana State Police.
Travis State, Louisiana State Police.
Thank you, gentlemen, for being here. Currently, when there is a spill or an incident at a plant, isn't the state police the first to be called by the plant?
Yes, sir. As you were speaking before about the right to know section, we have a hazmat hotline that is called, and from there we make notifications to the proper authorities, which includes our people to respond.
So it's a one-stop shop. You get a phone call, so you know who to contact.
Yes, sir.
So people who are involved in the event, they don't have a whole list of who should I call first. They know now it's the state police, right?
Yes, sir. Which includes us, DEQ, and so on.
Right. And that's the same thing if there is a.
Travis can elaborate a little bit more. He's more of an expert on that issue than I am.
And I just want to make a comment that that's part of what we're working on for the Florida, because that's not what we're trying to cut out here.
All right. You can add something to add to that?
So I don't believe there's any state requirement that we be the first entity notified. What I personally tell facilities, based on the totality of the circumstances. If you need to call ambulance first or the fire department or 911 to get those initial protective actions in place, those people are going to be responding and closer to your facility and get there much quicker than a trooper in Baton Rouge at headquarters could get to. So I say, if it's a major incident and you need to call 911 first or the local sheriff's department, by all means, do that. But they still have to notify the hazmat hotline within that time period specified in law, which is generally 1 hour.
Right, but the hazmat hotline is already funded in your department.
Yes, sir.
All right. And this bill only applies to pipelines? If there's a leak in a pipeline,
Yes, sir.
so you would be notified under this bill?
Yeah, basically what this is for the oversight down the road from the initial leak. This leaves any violation that was committed by the pipeline or in the aspect of DNR and all the state committees, and the state police are still notified, upon a disaster or a leak or a pipeline leak or whatever. That this bill does not do away with the part that it's only dealing with the oversight down the road.
And how is the oversight done today by the state police? What are we eliminating?
I guess, the part is what the state police do. They, once there is a leak, and I think that Trey can kind of help out a little bit more on this answer. I don't want to be telling you something that's not fact, so I might get Trey to kind of get up here and explain exactly how it's done once they have a leak and they have to report it.
Can you come up,
Come on up,
please?
Mr. Hill. And maybe just give us a scenario what we're trying to correct.
So since 2017, we've still been getting citations for, in almost every instance, to not having a written follow-up notification when we've already called the hazmat hotline to report a leak. With only one exception in the last year and a half, every one of them's been dismissed. We do courtesy calls to all the agencies that regulate us.
The citations are coming from the state police?
Yes.
Okay.
So Office of Pipeline Safety already has the authority to regulate that.
Do they?
Yes. They regulate everything we do from a
They-
safety perspective.
Do they cite you?
Yes, and they have a much bigger hammer than state police. Their fines can go from $200,000 a day, per instance, up to $2 million if it continues for a period of time.
When was the last time one company was fined?
I can't answer that. It had been my company. I only represent Atmos Energy, so I don't know.
The fact that we have high fines doesn't mean anything unless it's enforced. You would agree?
I would agree with that. I mean, it doesn't mean, they have, if somebody does something egregious, though, the tools are in place for them to do that.
Does this bill affect notification of the state police when there is a environmental incident?
So if this bill only addresses natural gas pipelines,
Okay.
there is nothing, if we have, and the reportable quantities are not going to happen except for maybe an extremely rare circumstance. The only way we breach the reportable quantity is if we have a third-party damage. An excavator gets into our facility. When our people get out there, they make an assessment on the needs that need to be addressed immediately. Sometimes that's just making the leak repair. And it may not meet the reportable quantity that requires us to call state police, but it is still going to show up in our annual report that we are required to file with Office of Pipeline Safety. And I'll tell you, they regulate everything. They come into our business, they make sure our employees are qualified to do the work. They regulate everything but rates and customer service, which is the PSC.
Is the Office of Pipeline Safety here?
I'm sorry, Senator.
The Office of Pipeline Safety, are they here today?
I do not think they're here today. They may be, but we sent this bill to the Director of Pipeline Safety before we even filed it to make sure he was okay with it.
It's a major bill that affects their office and they're not here.
I can't speak for them, Senator. I don't know why they're not here. This doesn't do anything to change their in fairness to them, it doesn't change their jurisdiction in any way, shape, or form.
I understand that, but I want to know, have questions about who was cited, what, examples of when their citations kick in. Answer this question: how will this bill enhance public safety?
We've gotten so many citations from state police that wind up getting dismissed. Our employees are more focused on calling state police when they arrive out on a site than focusing on the task at hand, and that is to make sure everything's safe for the public that we serve. Now, we're going to call 911 if we think we need a first responder, just like state police just mentioned to y'all. The other thing that happens is, on the backside of getting these citations, all of our folks that are in compliance, legal, operations, everything else, instead of focusing on doing other things, get focused on trying to get a citation that we didn't deserve dismissed.
What triggers a citation?
Most of them have been because we didn't have a follow-up written notification,
But
but it didn't meet the reportable quantity.
but there are events that take place that triggers a call to the state police.
Absolutely.
It triggers a follow-up that is not being done. It triggers a
And
citation.
it's not just state police, it's DEQ and DNR. They are the housing agency for the hazmat hotline.
How many citations a year are we talking about?
Just between Centerpoint and Atmos in the last year or so is 23, I think.
And that takes a whole team to make a phone call? and get
Everybody
dismissed?
gets pulled in. We take all of that seriously. It's burdensome, Senator, and it's duplicative. And like I said, Office of Pipeline Safety has that authority. The federal PHMSA, I want to be clear, PHMSA has primary jurisdiction over all pipeline hazardous material pipelines in the country. They can designate an agency in a state to administer their program, and it is Office of Conservation and DNR. If they don't believe Office of Conservation is doing the job well enough to meet their standards, they have the ability to take it over. And we're going to call 911. State police, when we call that hotline, they, like Trooper said, they may be remote. 99 times out of 100, at least 9 times out of 10, your local fire department's going to be the agency that responds.
What's the process of getting rid of a citation, or getting a citation dismissed? Is it a phone call?
We
going to
go
court?
to an administrative hearing, and then if we don't get it dismissed at that level, we've had some instances where we were going to take it to an administrative law judge. It never got that far, but anyway. It's duplicative, it's burdensome, and we're not like so when you look at other hazardous material pipelines, there's nothing to clean up. When we fix a leak, what we had, now they're all worried about methane releases, some of the folks that came and testified. This bill doesn't do anything to address that in any way, shape, or form. It won't increase methane emissions, it won't decrease them. So
All right. What amendment does the state police want to add to this?
that it's in statute that we have to call the hazmat hotline, which notifies them. And we're comfortable with that because we're going to have to call it anyway because Office of Pipeline Safety says we will.
Tyler, can we get that amendment?
We don't have it. We're working with state. We just talked.
We can write it?
Oh, however he wants to do it. State police was their internal lawyer was going to work on the amendment
I
between
think
now and the
if
floor.
we get the amendment on, I can vote for your bill. I don't want to wait for the
All right,
floor, but
let me-
I'm going to move on,
Well,
let somebody else
just-
take it.
if I-
Let me just see, let's get what your amendment is going to say, so,
Is there somebody else who needs to speak?
Senator Duplessis has a question, so if you can get with Tyler.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. Senator Duplessis?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was actually going to follow up from the last question that Senator Connick had around the proposed language or whatever's being discussed around the potential amendment. And I certainly would have had more comfort of knowing what we would be looking at with a future amendment. So I'm interested in doing more today in committee, if possible, on that amendment. But I realize I'm going to leave that to Senator Connick for now and ask a specific question about the bill that's before us. And there's language that's being struck from the bill that says, notwithstanding any provision of the law to the contrary, natural gas from distribution lines shall have a reportable release of 1,000 pounds or more. That's being taken out of the bill.
Right, because if we're not required to contact state police as a regulatory agency other than the reporting requirements of the hazmat hotline, that provision's no longer applicable. That was in there when they were regulating the damage prevention law. So, and to let you know, the discussions we had with state police yesterday took place yesterday afternoon on the amendment. And we didn't have time to draft one. We had technically, among ourselves, agreed to postpone the bill for a week. Mm-hmm. The chairman didn't want y'all to come back in next week for one bill. He said this was all of y'all Senate bills. So we went scrambling yesterday, worked out an agreement with state police to work out an amendment between here and the floor.
And I know what that's like. I understand how that works. I do. But, Mr. Chairman, go ahead.
All right, let's do this. I think some of us have some questions about this. Why don't we, Senator Facey will voluntarily defer to the bill to next week. That way we can get the amendment worked out. Everybody will be on pay, we'll know exactly what we have.
Yeah, and that's what we were trying to do, and when y'all wanted to try to push it in a day, because we didn't want to rush it in, we didn't want anybody to feel they didn't have all the information, and so we like you said, we tried to rush it in, and
we were on a short schedule,
and that's why we were asking for another week. So, because we wanted to make sure we got everything correct and everybody feel good about it.
Yeah, I didn't see it being that big of an issue. I'm going to make a motion that we voluntarily defer Senate Bill 62 to next week so we can work the amendment out, and I think everybody will be more comfortable. Senator Connick, you and Senator Duplessis could, work with everyone to see if there's an issue.
Yeah,
Hold on.
I probably will not have any problems with the bill. We just need to have the information.
No,
we need
totally
to know,
agreed.
And we need that office of whatever here.
Office of Pipeline Safety,
Yeah, they
Office
need
of
to be present,
Conservation.
So I would ask them to show
That's
up.
fine.
All right.
So, and
Public safety is the main thing, and we need disclosure and
And I'd like to add this comment, being in the pipeline business for over 30 years, it's the safest way of transportation, anything. There's a lot more laws than the public probably knows that with all the major pipeline and the smaller pipelines have to go through. There's a lot of commitments on making sure the pipelines are safe. Basically, my company works on pipelines on a regular basis, the older pipelines, to make sure they are safe. There's many companies like mine out there doing that. And I always say it's like what we do is it's like fixing the potholes in the highways, that we're fixing all the bad spots in the pipelines to make sure they do stay safe. It's a lot of strict ordinances on making sure they're safe. So.
All right. Senator Duplessis, you have anything? All right. What we'll do, Senator Facey, we'll just hear the bill next week. We'll go ahead and schedule a hearing for it and hear this bill.
Thank y'all.
thank you.
All right. The next bill is Senate Bill 100 by myself. Senator Price, if you'll take the chair.
Thank you. Next bill, Senate Bill 100 by Senator Lambert, provide for advanced recycling facilities. Senator Lambert.
Thank you, Senator Price. Basically, we all know that we have a problem with plastics, and that's one of our biggest problems, right now with the environment is we need to recycle them. And as we have gone through the years, we've seen more advanced techniques in how to break down plastics and reuse them. I think we're on the cutting edge of technology, and hopefully this bill will enable us to start really addressing the problem of plastics in the environment where we can start reusing these. This is a bill that's been, similar bills have been going through all out the country to try to address the environmental needs. I have a couple of people from the Chemical Association as well as the American Chemistry Council here that's going to present some testimony and how this works, and also a little brochure about the plastics, and we'd like to proceed with those. And I'm going to do ladies first.
Please introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Stephanie Cargile. I'm the ExxonMobil Baton Rouge Public and Government Affairs Manager. So just wanted to show you guys a very short video today that gives an overview of the opportunity we have here in Louisiana. Our company, ExxonMobil, has a new advanced recycling facility in Baytown, Texas. And right now that facility has the capability to process more than 80 million pounds of plastic a year. And we are currently assessing opportunities to bring a facility to Baton Rouge as well as several other places around the world. So specifically for those that don't know about advanced recycling, it's the ability to break down hard to recycle plastic waste into raw materials that can be made into certified circular plastics for food packaging, personal hygiene products, artificial grass, bubble wrap, etc. And that waste would normally go to a landfill. So through advanced recycling, we can make sales to customers for certified circular plastics and lower our greenhouse gas emissions profile more than processing the same amount of feedstock that is fossil-based. So according to one study, every 1,000 tons of waste that is plastic processed through this advanced recycling technology results in about 19% lower greenhouse gas emissions. So it's great technology, and a critical step in the whole process is collection. So we want to make sure that plastic waste makes it to the recycling bin and onto facilities like the proposed one in Louisiana for ExxonMobil, instead of ending up in a landfill. So to do that, we've got to collaborate. We've got to attract new businesses and new processes to Louisiana. In September, our company announced a partnership with Tenkate. And Tenkate Grass is currently operating in Louisiana, but they also had a facility in California where they were recycling artificial turf. And they're turning it now into new products instead of sending it to a landfill with the help of our advanced recycling facility in Baytown. So we want them to do the same thing and bring their new Tenkate Grass recycling facility here to Louisiana. There are other collaborations happening in Texas right now because of that advanced recycling facility. The whole city of Houston has increased recycling for their citizens, doubling or tripling recycling because of our new advanced recycling facility. And we have just announced a partnership with the Houston school system. So there are a lot of opportunities here in Louisiana with advanced recycling, not just with ExxonMobil, but with other companies as well. So with that, I'll show this short video that can explain it further.
Thank you.
What if we could address the trash that goes into our landfills by recycling more of the plastic items we use today? ExxonMobil is working to make this possible through advanced recycling.
Advanced recycling focuses on used plastics that are difficult to recycle through the mechanical means, from food packaging and bubble wrap to artificial grass. The process starts with collecting, sorting, and shredding plastic waste. The plastic waste is then fed into a unit at ExxonMobil's facility and heated so that it turns into its molecules. The molecules to be made into a variety of essential products. Products made through advanced recycling have the same quality and performance as our existing products.
Tenkata is a 300-plus-year-old textile manufacturing company, and right now we're the largest manufacturer of artificial turf in the world. If ExxonMobil's advanced recycling technology came to Baton Rouge, Tenkata would expect to create 30 to 50 jobs over the next 3 to 5 years. By taking one Tenkata football field and recycling it through the advanced program with ExxonMobil, that is equal to about 100,000 plastic bottles that no longer go to the landfill. The Tenkata brand has built more than 700 artificial turf fields just in the state of Louisiana, and for the first time in our history, we have somewhere to take it besides the landfill. ExxonMobil's advanced recycling opportunity changes the way fields are put down and now taken up, and not only in Baton Rouge, but Louisiana and the entire southeast United States.
A new facility for recycling in North Baton Rouge would be the epitome of what we need at this point. So ExxonMobil advanced recycling will allow things that we didn't know could be recycled before now to be recycled, and we can all be better recyclers at that point.
At ExxonMobil, we're problem solvers. I'm very excited that advanced recycling is giving us an opportunity to take material and be reprocessed to a lot of the products that we use every day.
Thank you.
And members, I think that says it all. It's very important that we have stuff that we can recycle. I mean, all you have to do is ride around and you'll see a lot of plastic bottles, plastic debris. It's winding up in the landfills, and this is an opportunity. This bill makes some changes to allow the process to go forward. We passed it a couple of years ago, and as you know, science and technology keep improving, and hopefully this will be something that we can pass, start using in Louisiana, and really making a difference from the environment. I think that's really important because we all know the problems with plastics.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Read some cards in support. And excuse me if I mispronounce your name, but Caleb Holmes with the Sierra Club, Terrence Jen, Center for Planning Excellence, all in support, not wishing to speak. Lauren Hayden with the Louisiana Association of Business and Industry, Tommy Fauché with Lamoga, Jeff Skuski with ExxonMobil, David Zoller with Baton Rouge Area Chamber, Ashley Syrian with Lamoga, Ashley Kane maybe, Liz Mangum with ExxonMobil, Greg Bowser with the Louisiana Chemical Association, Nicole Dager with BASF Corporation, and David Cavell with Dow Chemical. We do have two cards, and both check out present and would like to speak. Mr. Wes Robertson with the American Chemistry Council, and Stephanie Covell with ExxonMobil. Is that you? Okay. Wes Robertson.
That's me, Senator. My name is Wes Robinson, Senior Director of State Affairs for the American Chemistry Council, the National Trade Association for companies in the business of chemistry. I'm really here to answer questions, and would be happy to do so at the appropriate time if there are any.
Okay, there are none at this time, and we'll move to President and would provide information if necessary. Matt Perilou with LDEQ and Daniel Chatham with LDEQ. We do have some cards in opposition. I'll read those out at this time, those not wishing to speak. Jackson Voss with Alliance for Affordable Energy. Morgan Shannon. Reverend James Webb. Lauren Hayden with Lobby. LABI, and Jack Sweeney for himself out of New Orleans. A couple of cards that, one card that's opposed and would like to speak is Scott Eustace. Someone make room so he can come up.
Hello, Scott Eustace again, New Orleans, Community Science Director, Healthy Golf. Our concerns with these exemptions from Title V permitting concern the lack of cumulative impacts analysis for these facilities. Our understanding is that the waste would be brought in from the region, from out of state, and it seems to us it would create a net increase in plastics in the river and places like the St. James Canal. As well as increased air pollution, which currently we're not sufficiently evaluating, leads to a lot of illnesses across the state, particularly in African American areas. I know that Senator Lambert last year on this bill said we've got a problem with race in Louisiana. And that's what we've seen with the proposals for these facilities. 100% of the proposals that we're seeing announced in the business press or in the permitting side are in African American areas. So that concerns us when we know we have great needs to monitor pollution and needs to regulate additional pollution in those areas. So that's why we oppose the bill. Thank you.
Thank you. And we have one other card, Chanel Levine, not wishing to speak, but in opposition. Senator Lambert, you can close.
Thank you, Senator Price. And like I say, going back, we have a real problem with plastics. This is a situation where science is helping us to address the problem, puts us on the cutting edge. Hopefully we can start removing some of this waste. It will be less in our landfills and be able to reuse a lot of things and reduce our carbon imprint. I think this is a winner for the state. It's being done in Europe and being done all over the world. And let's be on the cutting edge of recycling and get some things done to clean up the environment. Thank you.
I have a motion by Senator Connick to move Senate Bill 100 favorable. Seeing no opposition, the bill will be reported favorable. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, the next bill that we have is Senate Bill number 35 by Senator Fields. And let's see. All right. Mr. McLeod, I guess could you read it into the record just for clarification on Mr. Wilson, either one? Yeah. Let's see. I think you're on. Well, no, there you are.
Oh, yeah. Thanks, Mr. Chairman. We have Senate Bill 35 by Senator Fields, requires air monitoring systems in certain permitted facilities.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members. I'm going to be as brief as possible. Joining me at the witness table is General Honoré, Russell Honoré, also Dr. Kim Terrell, and also we're going to have Dr. Adrian Cantor to speak as well. The bill is very simple, and this committee have seen the bill before. This is probably the maybe fourth time the committee has seen the bill. It requires that owners or operators of each facility at the facility's expense to install, operate an air monitoring system in a location determined by the Department of Environmental Quality. It also requires that the system shall, at a minimum, meet the EPA's monitoring requirements and measures and record the air pollutant concentration by monitoring each pollutant under the EPA's air quality standard and the Louisiana Administrative Code list of toxic air pollutants to detect an exceedant of the air quality standards or the existence of a public health risk. The third thing that the bill does is require real-time data must be collected from the system and processed and transmitted without delay so that the exceedance of the air quality standard can be identified and addressed and the state and local communities be warned. The fourth thing the bill does is require that the real-time data dissemination to the public in the event of an exceedance of air quality standards shall include but not be limited to real-time text messaging or phone calls sent to the community alert system for first responders, municipalities, community members, and those who are located nearby this facility, and any other person who choose to receive the message or call. And lastly, it requires that the facility owners and operators to maintain records of all air monitoring system data for 5 years after the data is collected and to report the data to the department twice a year. That's what the bill does in a nutshell. I'm joined at the table with General Russell Honore, along with Dr. Kim Terrell, who would like to make further comments, if it's okay with you, Mr. Chairman.
That's fine. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Russell Honore, 14443 Memorial Tower Drive. It wasn't long ago we were here with a similar bill talking about air monitoring. And I remember all your patience that day, Mr. Chairman, and everybody had a good discussion. And we weren't successful, but we're back. Because we keep coming back because the current concern, the state of Louisiana and the concentration along the I-10 corridor and even going into North Louisiana is significant with the number of facilities we have, and many of them are foreign owned. It doesn't mean nothing. They hire our people. They produce products we need. But we need to assure our people that we're using the best technology, and people have an expectation for knowing what's going on in the community. And this bill will strengthen that. After the last time we were here, within 2 weeks, Senator Lambert, you might remember, we had an event over in Iberville at the Dow Olin plant. And he's not here. The president of parish president is not here from Iberville Parish, but I gave you a letter he wrote, somewhat asking DEQ and the state police in that particular event just to truncate it. The event happened right after dark. People were in their homes. Accidents happened. Pipe breaks. Chlorine exposure. It's all over the news. All of the normal players are there. DEQ is there. State police is there. Sheriff is there. But everybody was listening to what the plant operator was saying, that everything's inside the fence. Somehow that chlorine went to that security fence and never went past it, is what they were reporting. And come by the 10 o'clock news, thereabouts, the report was, you don't have to shelter in place some more, go about your business. Well, as reported here by the parish president, the next morning, he come to realize some 35 people or 34 people from his parish were in the hospital. And we attribute that to not having automated air monitoring that can go straight to the people once an event is happening and the people are kept informed. You'll also see the parish president, when challenged DEQ and state police about the shelter in place, they said, well, we should have done this for 35 hours. It didn't happen. And people got exposed. So the purpose of this bill, again, is to ask that we have air monitoring, automated air monitoring. Last Friday, we looked at the costs. LDEQ had about $4.5 million. And miraculously over the weekend, I guess they just did some of my home parish, Point Capri Parish math. I'm a graduate of Louisiana Public School System, and that number went from $4.5 million to $8 and some million on the cost of doing this. But even that if you take the almost 500-pound plants we have, it comes to a cost of about $17,000 per plant that they would have to support for LDEQ. And look, LDEQ does need help. They need money to do this, but that money comes from the plant at a cost of about $17,000. It's worth it for the safety of our people. Nobody's trying to put the plants out of business. We just want them to comply. And when something breaks, the community knows. And in the case of the Dow Olin plant, two of the biggest plants we have, hire a lot of people, the system didn't work. Within 2 weeks of us being here last year, asking the consideration of air monitoring, sir. This just keep the people informed and keep the local government informed. Because in this case, according to the parish president, he didn't think he had the right information to end that shelter in place based on the recommendation. So we ask consideration again, sir, and committee members for moving this bill forward, and let's try to improve our air monitoring. And pending question, I'll defer to Dr. Terrell for some comments.
Dr. Terrell, go ahead, please.
Thank you so much. My name is Kimberly Terrell. I'm a Director of Community Engagement and a staff scientist at the Tulane Environmental Law Clinic. And I'm speaking here in my professional capacity, but I'm not speaking on behalf of Tulane University. I was requested to provide expert input by Green Army, and I regularly collect and analyze air quality data as part of my job, so I'm familiar with the costs and the benefits of this kind of information. I often tell people that air monitoring is like going to the grocery store. The cost depends on what you're getting, and it can be as expensive or as economical as your budget needs it to be. From my perspective, what's exciting is that we now have low-cost EPA-approved methods for generating reliable air quality data that can be compared to legal standards. So I brought with me an example in my pocket. It's a little metal tube, and this is basically a sponge. It's packed with carbon material, and so it passively absorbs pollutants. And the way it works to deploy it, you just unscrew the cap, you hang it up along a fence line, and you leave it alone for 2 weeks. Then you come back, cap it, send it to the lab, and for $93, the lab will analyze it. There are a lot of different options out there, but this is one example of where you can get a lot of information and a lot of bang for your buck. In 2015, EPA certified this method as being reliable enough to collect benzene data around oil refineries, including refineries in Louisiana. So some plants, not all plants, but some refineries are already using this technology to collect information. And I also brought documentation about this method. You can find it in CFR Title 40, but I'll share that with you all at the end. So it's a new method, but it's well established enough that we can be confident in the data that's being collected. It's low cost because it doesn't require an air pump. It doesn't require electricity. These are small, they're portable. And when you collect a sample every 2 weeks, there's fewer samples for the lab to analyze. The most expensive part of this type of air monitoring is shipping the tubes to the lab. So it's $150 round trip shipping for overnight shipping. And like I said, it's $93 for the lab to tell you how much pollutants are in the tube. So from my perspective, if I had a chemical plant, I could put 10 of these tubes around my plant and have information on pollutant concentrations at my fence line for a pretty minimal cost. You would also need an employee to put the tubes out and collect them and mail them in, and so you're creating jobs in that way. And if it's done strategically, it can actually save plants money. So for example, imagine you have 10 of these little tubes around your facility. One of them is always reading higher than the others. So you investigate that part of your facility, you find that you have a leak, and you correct it, and so you save product, and that helps offset the cost of monitoring. It's also important to understand that as these low-cost monitoring methods become more accessible, community groups and environmental groups are starting to use them, including here in Louisiana. So again, if I operated a chemical plant, I would want to be collecting my own data so that I could know that it was being collected properly. I can imagine a situation where a resident nearby puts one of these up in their carport and they end up measuring emissions from their car exhaust and they try to blame it on the plant. Well, if the plant has its own set of air monitoring data, it can demonstrate that the emissions at its fence line are actually lower than the emissions in that person's carport. I can also imagine a situation where you have a plant that isn't playing by the rules and it's creating problems for the plants that are operating responsibly. You can protect your interests by having your own set of air monitoring data at your fence line showing that emission concentrations are in compliance with legal standards. There are 18 different pollutants that the EPA has validated this method for, and there are about another 80 that can be measured with some additional field validation. So there's lots of options for this, and ultimately this method is designed for volatile compounds, things that evaporate from product, things that evaporate from containers. So imagine you leave a can of gasoline in your garage and you forget to put the cap on. You're going to come back to an empty can of gasoline and a smelly garage, right? It's in everybody's best interest, the plants, the communities, and the regulators, for these products to stay in the containers and not end up in people's lungs. So thank you for the opportunity to provide input.
Did you fill out a green card?
Yes, sir. Well, it's a white card, sir.
Okay, all right, thank you. The only thing with the monitor that you have there, that is something you put and it collects the chemicals over a period of time, the release. So what is it, like 30 days or?
2 weeks,
You can
14
do 2
days.
weeks. And you'll know what days it.
So ultimately what you're getting is a 2-week average concentration.
Okay.
So if you want real-time information, there's other types of monitors.
Yeah, this wouldn't be real time. Real time would be more expensive than that, I would assume.
It depends on what you're monitoring for. So EPA has a type of monitor called S-pods that it used around Danka, and those basically are designed to detect plumes of VOCs. They have like what's called a PID sensor, so they can be triggered by a high concentration of things. So this tube is better for measuring chronic exposure to lower concentrations, whereas an S-pod you could use to measure, plumes of VOCs from, major events.
Do you know what procedures we're using now in the plants, monitoring?
Well, like I said, for the oil refineries, they're using these tubes to collect benzene data. And it differs plant by plant. So a lot of plants have what's called a continuous emissions monitoring system that basically collects real-time information. It's a more expensive system, but it collects information on a longer list of pollutants. And then you have things like the S-pods that are a lower cost option, but they're basically telling you, is there a plume or not, versus like quantified concentrations.
But we're collecting data now in the plants.
It depends on the permit requirements. So it's plant by plant, and the monitoring that's being done in the plants, the continuous emissions monitoring, is not publicly released data. So it's collected and used to determine compliance with DEQ and permit requirements, but it's not the kind of thing that's going to alert a community if there's a leak, right? Like there's no system for transmitting that information, and not all plants have to do that. It depends on what's in their permit.
Okay. All right, thank you. Let's see.
Shatner is our next scientist, if it's okay, sir.
All right, and your name, please?
Hi, everybody. I'm Dr. Adrienne Katner. I'm the director of the LSU School of Public Health Environmental and Occupational Health Program.
All right. If you go ahead.
Okay. I'm going to try to be brief. I have over 20 years of experience in conducting environmental public health surveillance, first as a researcher at the National Cancer Institute, and later on as a manager for several of the Louisiana Department of Health's environmental public health programs. I was asked to provide information about a study that we conducted at LSU, looking at air emissions from the Denka Performance Elastomer facility in Laplace. So in 2021, we were asked by LDH to review cancer cases in St. John My personal role was to evaluate exposure to chloroprene, a likely carcinogen. To do this, we did air and biomonitoring in September 2021. That month, Hurricane Ida hit and Denka stopped all operations, so I really didn't expect to find anything. But we did detect chloroprene in off-site air at levels 4 times above the EPA's health guideline, which is the maximum limit for lifetime exposure to avoid cancer. Now, operations at the site have been there since 1964, so people in this community have been exposed almost 6 decades. But other monitoring at the time found levels 20 to 2,000 times higher than the guideline. So chloroprene was highest by the Fifth Ward Elementary School, and that is a concern because children are very sensitive to tiny amounts of mutagen, which is chloroprene's carcinogenic mode of action. Children grow rapidly, leaving less time to repair their DNA. They also are slower to eliminate it. And you don't need a large quantity of these mutagens to have an impact. Only binding to DNA can trigger cancer. So it was a concern when we did find metabolites that were unique to chloroprene in the urine of returning residents. This was, again, when the facility wasn't operating. Industry typically operates 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and years of previous monitoring after emission controls were installed did indicate that there are frequent elevations of chloroprene above the now proposed regulatory standard. Levels about 100 times over the now proposed standard were about a mile away at Ochsner Hospital, and even 2 miles away, levels were 9 times over the proposed standard. Our assessment suggested that Fifth Ward students likely face unacceptably high cancer risk based only on the 6 years that they attend the school from pre-kindergarten to 4th grade. Since we only estimated cancer risk from chloroprene, this is likely an underestimated risk. And this is critical to note as we detected metabolites of other carcinogens in residents' urine, in all of the year's residents' urine, indicating exposure to 1,3-butadiene and epichlorohydrin. These are known and probable carcinogens, both of which are associated with plastics production. So given these risks, we recommended that proactive exposure reduction measures take place, as well as continuous off-site air monitoring. We felt this was warranted given the number of accidental releases by Denka. Between 2017 and 2021, Denka averaged about 1 emergency event a year, which is defined as events that can endanger public health and safety, property, or the environment. So this study revealed the value of air monitoring as it can highlight risks even when compliance is met and provides a basis upon which we can develop interventions. Now, Census Tract 708, which contains Denka and Fifth Ward, also had statistically higher incidence rates of all cancer versus Louisiana based on records from 2006 to 2014. It's also associated with respiratory disease, and there are consistently high rates of asthma ER visits in the parish. EPA upheld our recommendation after doing their own investigation and recommended immediate air monitoring to identify safer school locations and possible relocation. So I just want to point out that without this data, without air monitoring data, without data on hazards, we cannot confirm what the source is, and this can delay public health intervention. An example of this is back in 2015, LDH was called to investigate 2 incidents of respiratory symptoms among students at the Leon Gacho School in Reserve, Louisiana, which is right down the street from the Fifth Ward. LDH documented student respiratory ailments, headaches, vomiting, burning eyes, and weakness, and concluded that student symptoms were likely due to industry emissions, but no air monitoring data was available to investigate further. This school is adjacent to Air Products, which had just been fined for permit violations. 3 years later, it made the EPA's list of top 25 U.S. facilities releasing the most ethylene oxide, a known carcinogen which also causes the health effects that were reported by those students. Subsequent EPA monitoring resulted in a finding of violations, fines, and a settlement, which requires the company to reduce air emissions by 2026. This is 10 years after students at Leon Gacho got sick. So risks from industry are very real and should not be downplayed. Accidents can and do happen. This makes air monitoring extremely critical. Data collected by the state on hazardous or toxic substance releases revealed that between 2001 and 2014, there were 9,702 hazardous emergency events in Louisiana, releasing 14,897 substances and impacting over 1,000 victims, whose health impacts included respiratory, central nervous system effects, and heart problems. As public health scientists, data enables unbiased decision-making. Data on hazards, exposures, and health allows us to confirm or eliminate sources, which supports development of the most appropriate interventions. Public health surveillance is not possible without data. I'd like to thank the committee for listening and enter into the record a copy of the reports that I referenced in my statement.
Thank you. And let's see, we have also present and would like to speak, Larry Saraparu. Okay.
Chairman, I think for the interest of time, and I talked to General Honore, and I think only 4 individuals are going to speak briefly. And if I'm wrong, let me know. I think it was only Pastor Gregory Manning, Ms. Gail LaBeouf, Myrtle Felton, and Barbara Washington.
I'm going to go ahead and just read these, and that way if they want to speak or just say they waive, that way we'll have a complete record. All right. And Mr. Sarapa, you do wish to speak? Yes. Okay. If you would, please state your name and your address for us, please.
Yes, Larry Saraparu Jr., 502 Highway 18, Edgard, Louisiana. And I just want to say to the committee here that I have spent 36 years in the chemical industry. I retired in 2011. I'm a former councilman for St. John Parish, and I was nominated and appointed to Lafourche Levee Basin. My concern is that the public have no idea on the releases that's happening around these industries. I think it's very critical and important that we have these monitors in place, not only to protect the public, but to protect people working at those plants. It's very, very important. I was one of those that had my urine tested about 3 years ago, and I had metabolites in my urine. The second highest reading came from the West Bank. My home is 1 mile across the river from Denka DuPont, who is constantly emitting chloroprene into our community. And chloroprene affects all the organs of your body. Every organ chloroprene affects. The health director, Dr. Guidry, before he retired, he was subpoenaed to the council. He said no one should breathe chloroprene at any level. This came from Dr. Guidry, the director of the health department for the state. I took my job very seriously for the 36 years I spent. Every rail car that went out the plant, I had to put a seal on every pipe that was taken off and put back on. And after I put the seals on, I had to sign off. And if that car was released from the plant without a seal, I was subject to be arrested by the DOTD and the state police. Those were guidelines I have to follow. I think we need to make sure that every industry follows strict guidelines to protect our community. You guys are elected officials. You took an oath to serve and protect. My dad's 92 years old, and I hope that we can make everybody that's living within the industry live and have a good quality of life. I urge you to definitely consider supporting this monitoring bill, and I want to thank Mr. Fields for not giving up and keeping it on the table. Thank you.
Let me ask you, you worked in which plant?
Monsanto Company.
Did y'all monitor inside the plant?
Yes, we did. Matter of fact, we had sensors that would trip the plant. If there was a hydrochloric release in that unit, it would automatically shut the plant down. So we have the technology to do it. And the monitoring that's going to be placed, industry is going to pay for it. It won't cost the taxpayers $1 to get information to save some lives and give people a good quality of life.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
We also have Gail J. LaBeouf present and would like to speak. Is Ms. LaBeouf, you here? And if you do wish to speak, if you don't want to, you can just let me know. Okay. That's why I'm calling everybody, just to make sure. I tell you what, I'll call a couple more people up. That way we can go, and we'll just take turns. Ms. Myrtle H. Felton. If you wish to speak, Ms. Felton, come on up and and we'll do three at a time. And then we also have Barbara Washington. Is Miss Washington here and would like to speak? Come on up, Mr. Washington. And what I'll ask y'all to do, we're going to start with Ms. Felton. If you'll state your name and tell us what you want to tell us, and then we also, we'll go to the next witness, which will be Ms. LaBeouf, and then Ms. Washington. All right. Ms. Felton, it's all on you.
That's Miss Belton.
Oh, you sat in the wrong chair. I'm sorry.
Yes, I sat in front General Honorary because I'm short, so
Okay.
he can still stretch his legs.
Let's go then. I'll let y'all go with y'all's own choice. Just state your name and where you live for the record. Go ahead. We're going to go with you first then. All right.
Afternoon. My name is Myrtle Felton, and I reside at 8222 Pleasant Hill Street. I'm here today to ask my senators to pass this bill 35. As we as a people are dying rapidly, and I personally believe within my heart that we are dying from cancer because of the pollution that we have to breathe 24/7. There's not a day I come out of my house that I breathe fresh air where my lungs really get excited. Most of the time, I have to go back in my house, close the door, and go back in my house. Unfortunately, I have been given the opportunity to have lost a lot of family members to cancer. In a 3-month period, I lost 3 relatives to cancer and 1 with respiratory illnesses. That was the most devastating experience anyone can ever have to go through. There's not a day pass, a night I get in my bed and I say my prayers before I get in the bed. And I ask the Lord to have mercy upon any and everyone. Protect them from this awful, dreaded disease. Have any of you ever had the opportunity to visit someone with cancer and see the pain and the suffering that they have to go through, which is unnecessary if these chemical plants would tell the community what's going on, put monitors so we'll know what's going on? The plant right in front of my door, less than a mile from my house, was leaking sulfuric acid mist and hydrogen oxide for 6 whole years. I couldn't prove it, but I knew something was happening because my body is not the same as it used to be. And I know age has a lot to do with it, but I am more than certain that it is the pollution that I have to deal with 24/7. It's not nice when we have so many plants that surround us and other people have none that surrounds them. But what y'all fail to realize is that pollution goes everywhere. It may take you far longer for the pollution to affect you than it does me, because all of the plants are surrounded by me. And I really hope that you all would consider this bill. And if you don't consider the bill The next person that you hear that has cancer, I would like for you to go visit them on a weekly basis to see how it actually tear a person's system down. They are like a newborn baby, can't help themselves. I beg of you, please pass this bill. Thank you.
All right, I'm gonna let y'all decide who wants to go next.
Thank you, Chairman, and I am Gail LaBeouf. I reside at 758 North Isidore, Guernsey, Louisiana, and I've been there for 22 years. But I live less than a mile from Kaiser Atlantic Aluminum, is what it's called now, that was built in 1950. This March of 2023, the federal agency cited this plant with 370 safety violations and 3 electrocutions. They use bauxite and they make mercury. This mercury has been found in Blind River and in my community on the East Bank, as well as on the West Bank in Walker, excuse me, I have friends that want to come up, in Wallace, Louisiana. This plant was built before a buffer zone was put into effect. I hope you pass Senate Bill 35. I moved from Convent, Louisiana, just right off of LA 44 at Route 1, Box 10, Convent, Louisiana. I love saying Route 1 because you know it's the River Road. I live just a fourth of a mile from Freeport, which is now Mosaic. That plant has had several violations, but its most known one is its gypsum pond that was cited in 2015 because of the ponds that was also in Florida. This pond was a threat to Blind River as well as a threat to the local community at that time. I lived also a mile from Occidental. I could not find any violations on Occidental that wasn't earlier than 2018. But I know personally that in 1985, I ran from a chlorine leak from this facility. And I went 2 miles down the road in my car, and I brought that chlorine leak to my aunt, and she had to go in the house because she was choking from it. Pass Senate Bill 35. I've had numerous friends and family members with chronic illnesses and cancer illnesses. Alberta Shorty, COPD, died from COVID-19 related symptoms. Zell Williams, stage 4 cancer. By the time she found out about it, she only lived a few months. Just last week, my cousin, Harrison West, Imelda West's oldest son, he died a few months after finding out he had stage 4 cancer. Why does it have to be stage 4 when Senate Bill 35 could have been in place and had the community alerted? I myself have been diagnosed with liver cancer. I cannot say to you with any certainty that any carcinogen has caused my cancer, but you all, as well as no one else, can say with a certainty that any known carcinogen has not caused my cancer. I am begging you, asking you, that these plants, these new plantations of the South, who's not helping build America as the old plantations did, with the help of my slave ancestors, They are tearing down America and depleting the ozone layer of its air, its water, and its soil. This cannot stand anymore. We have to start somewheres. Let's start with Senate Bill 35 and give our children and our grandchildren a future that they can build upon. That is why we're here today, because we want our children to know that we care enough and that we want them to build upon whatever we can do today, here, now. Please pass Senate Bill 35. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Ms. Washington.
Yes, thank you, Chairman Lambert. My name is Barbara Washington. I reside at 8191 Pleasant Hill Street in Convent, Louisiana, St. James Parish. And for far too long, our communities have been sounding the alarm about toxic cancer-causing pollutants emitted daily from petrochemical industries and other facilities that have been making us sick. There are no monitors that measure levels of toxic air pollution in any St. James Parish neighborhood. A study from Tulane Environmental Law Clinic found that combined industrial plants in St. James Parish release at least 17 cancer-causing pollutants. We've been feeling the effects of it for over 60 years. We have been poisoned over the last 6 years from nuclear steel emitting unpermitted sulfuric acid mist and hydrogen sulfide into our community. Chronic coughs, burning eyes, respiratory problems, headaches, all of that. We have been experiencing all of those symptoms that those chemicals are causing. I'm asking you to vote yes on Senate Bill 35. This bill is personal to me because my sister, Mary Washington, died of metastatic lung cancer. She started with a chronic cough, and when she was diagnosed, she was in her 4th stages. My next door neighbor, Ronald Vary, just died on Thursday from cancer. My uncle right now has prostate cancer, Richard Young. My best friend, who was also my prayer partner, Irma Jock, died of cancer. My cousin, Austin Robertson, Leroy Jones, Viola Jones, Lily Davis, all of them in the same neighborhood, dying from cancer. Just found out that 15 people in October, when we had a breast cancer awareness event, 15 breast cancer survivors in the community. And we know from Tulane Law Clinic that air pollution exposure is one of the effects of having breast cancer. Senator Lambert, I am one of your constituents, and I'm asking you and everyone here to vote yes on Senate Bill 35. We need real-time air monitoring to tell us what's going on with our health. Why are we sick? When we go to the doctor, we cannot even explain what is going on. So yes, we are asking you once again, vote yes on Senate Bill 35. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Washington. We have some other people who are present and would like to speak. Chanel Levine. Ms. Levine, yeah, would you like to speak? Also, we have Jacques Moriel. Mr. Moriel. And then also we have a Monique Harden is present and would like to speak. If y'all would come up, please. I can't hear you. All right. Why don't you make All right. Senator Connick.
Mr. Chairman, I really appreciate what was being said, and these individuals need a chance to speak but I think we get the message. So in the interest of time, we can limit the amount of time given to each speaker to 3 minutes. I'll make that motion.
Is there any objection? You know, we've got a number of people that want to speak on both issues, and I hate to cut people off because this is an important issue, but if y'all could just kind of, you know, get to the point, and that way we can, because I've got a bunch of cards in opposition plus information, and I want everybody to have their say that we can, you know, hear. So with that motion, there's no opposition from the committee, so we're going to limit y'all to 3 minutes. So, Madam Secretary, if you can let us know when they're getting close. Thank you. All right. Go ahead and just.
About a minute, if that. So my name is Shamel Levine. I'm the Chief Operating Officer for Rise St. James. We're located in Welcome, Louisiana, St. James Parish, is Senator Price's district. We are surrounded by 12 industries within a 10-mile radius. My mom, Sharon Levine, has autoimmune hepatitis caused by the pollution. There is at least one funeral per week in St. James. People are dying from cancer, and women of childbearing age are having miscarriages. When they don't miscarry, the babies are born prematurely. The 2 street neighborhood we call Burton Lane is boxed in by 2 petrochemical industries. Storage tanks spewing harmful chemicals have been placed within yards of people's homes. Many people in the neighborhood have died from cancer and other respiratory illnesses due to the pollution they have been exposed to. We need you all to vote yes for the air monitoring bill because we need to know how much the plants are emitting and if they are violating their air permits. We need them to reduce the emissions of cancer-causing chemicals into the air, water, and soil. We ask that you all stand with your constituents and not the petrochemical industry. Please help save our lives by supporting our air monitoring in real time to identify violations and ensure they are corrected in a timely manner. Please prioritize our lives over the cost to the plants. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. I think it might be good afternoon at this time. Feels like it.
Yes.
Okay, my name is Monique Harden. I'm the Director of Law and Public Policy at the Deep South Center for Environmental Justice. We're the longest-serving environmental justice resource center in the United States. We're based in New Orleans, Louisiana. Making my comments really brief for this 3-minute time space I have, I just want to jump into a particular situation that arose in Louisiana that I believe makes the case for Senate Bill 35. First, I want to thank Senator Cleo Fields for introducing it again and standing with the people who prioritize their health, their safety, and the wellness of their communities. And I also want to have a special warm greetings to Senator Royce Duplessis, my Duplessis back home in New Orleans. Vinyl chloride causes cancer in humans. This carcinogen gained national attention recently when it was released during the fiery freight train derailment in East Palestine, Ohio. In Calcasieu Parish, vinyl chloride was present in concentrations that exceeded Louisiana's ambient air quality standards in the historic Black community of Mossville. However, the residents of Mossville did not learn that they were exposed to an unlawfully high concentration of vinyl chloride until 5 years later. There was no immediate notice provided by the Louisiana Department of Environmental Quality to residents of this dangerous chemical in the air they breathed. There were no LDEQ monitors detecting these exceedances of vinyl chloride. It was not until an industrial company operating in Mossville filed an application for a Title V Part 70 air permit renewal that it was found that for 5 years, Mossville residents were exposed to its emissions of vinyl chloride at concentrations that were 5 times above Louisiana's ambient air quality standard. Mossville is just one of numerous communities in Louisiana where major sources of industrial pollution operate without having to prove that each moment of emissions do not exceed permit limits or violate our air quality standards. This is something that they are legally obligated to do pursuant to the air permits that have been issued for their facilities under Part 70 or Title V of the Clean Air Act, which is delegated and administered by our Louisiana Department of Environmental Quality. Without continuous air monitoring to demonstrate whether a facility is in compliance or not with air quality standards and its permit limits, Louisiana residents have no assurance that their health, their safety are being protected. Continuous air monitoring is vital for the health and well-being of residents here in Louisiana, in particular, those living in areas in close geographic proximity to industrial facilities that are major sources of toxic air pollution. Senate Bill 35 provides for immediate notice of a pollutant that exceeds air quality standards.
Ma'am, we're
Yes.
getting past the 3 minutes.
Okay. Can I just end with this?
Yes.
With regards to the fiscal note that accompanies the legislation, it's, there's an underlined section that calls into question DEQ's numbers in terms of the expense of operating a continuous air monitoring program in the state. However, even with DEQ's numbers, regardless of whether or not you think it's ramped up or not, it really comes down to just about $17,000 per industrial facility to monitor their toxic air emissions on a continuous basis. I'm paying this amount for home insurance now to Louisiana citizens. If I can pay $17,000 a year, I think industrial companies that broadcast the millions of dollars they receive in profits can do the same for our air quality.
All right, thank you. I know, I hate to cut you off, but we have some more people that still wish to speak.
I have a written, because you've cut me off, I would like to submit these written comments along with appendix information.
That's fine.
Thank you for the record.
Thank you. All right, next we have Gregory Manning and Catlin Joshua and Devontae Lewis, Public Service Commissioner. If y'all could please come up if y'all wish to speak and introduce yourself and let us know your comments. And like I say, if y'all would try to keep it as short as possible because we still have a lot of people in testimony to take. All right, I'm gonna let y'all decide who wants to start first.
Let me just say this. I think as we, again, Reverend Gregory Manning, pastor of Broadmoor Community Church, founder and chairman of the Greater New Orleans Interfaith Climate Coalition, which I founded in order to teach clergy how to advocate for those who are suffering from injustices in specifically the river parishes. What we see happening right now is not good enough. And so the question that we ask is, when it comes to 24/7 continuous real-time air monitoring, why not? I think about the three women who sat here prior to us a little bit ago, Miss Barbara, Miss Gail, and Miss Myrtle, and their age and their commitment and their resilience and the fact that they are suffering. Not only suffering health-wise, but also suffering mentally of duress that I cannot imagine. Every day living with trauma that they're thinking, when will there be an explosion? When will there be an emergency where I need to evacuate? What we're dealing with here is the fact that people need to be made aware in real time. Now, it's not everybody, because everybody won't get on the computer or access an app that they want the information, but some people do. And so we're not talking about simple monitoring. We're talking about people having access to what's going on so that they can protect themselves. This bill is incredibly vital. I'm in favor of it. I thank Senator Fields for bringing it forward again. It is a travesty that it has taken us 4 times to present this bill, but it would be a wonderful victory and something to celebrate if this was advanced forward. I live with the understanding every day that as a pastor, we have to look at things and say, it's not perfect. How do I do better? And so we look at this opportunity and say to ourselves, how do we do better that keeps people in mind, humanity in mind, people who are suffering in mind, and their trauma that they're dealing with each and every day. And so finally, as I close, the scripture that I always think about is the fact that God says in his word that we're to love our Lord God with all our heart, soul, mind, and strength. and to love our neighbor as ourself. Wherever we live in this room, wherever we're representing, the people that are affected along this industrial corridor are our neighbors.
I hate to cut you off.
I won't go preach, it's all right.
Yeah. But I mean, we need to move on because there's a number of people. All right. Commissioner Lewis?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and members of the committee. Devontae Lewis, Public Service Commissioner, District 3. And I'm not going to belabor the point that my fellow friends have talked about, but I just want to bring the stark reality of what my constituents are facing, and I think part of the reason we saw cosmic change in my election. We heard about the Tulane Law Clinic report, and I want to just be even starker. That report showcased that Black Louisianians, particularly those who live within District 3, which starts in West Baton Rouge, runs through the river parishes and ends in Orleans, are 7 to 21 times more likely to be exposed to air pollution than any other person. 7 to 21 times more likely. We are talking about an industry here, petrochemical, industrial plants. I have more industrial plants in my district than any other commission district in the United States of America. And these industries, I think, have done some things well by providing jobs. But when we are talking about the cost to provide just simple information to our constituents is really low. I'm from Lake Charles. I know the community in Mossville and what happened there. Those are family friends. Those are my relatives. And so this is not just about, I think as it is, whether or not we do what is right. It's whether we do what is just. And the question that is before you today, do you believe people should know what they're breathing? I think it's a human right to have fresh air and clean water. I don't think it's a privilege that we should get it whether or not an industrial company decides they want to tell us if our air is clean and our water's fresh. That should be a right to all of us. And I think the question before us today is, we are seeing countless of millions of dollars of investments. We are hearing about all of the great technology that they can invest in and that they're doing in recycling, or what they may do when it comes towards the Inflation Reduction Act or carbon sequestration. So why can't we do it in air monitoring? Why can't we put dollars there? And I think that's the question that we're asking us today. Can we, the people of Louisiana, just have fresh air to breathe? Thank you.
Thank you. All right. We also have a number of cards of people who are present but do not wish to speak. Peter Robin Brown, Louisiana Progress Action. Scott Faustus, present but does not wish to. Eustace. Okay. Kind of hard reading some of this. Reverend James Vanderweel, present but does not wish to speak and in support. Caleb Holmes, present and support, does not wish to speak. Kevin Fitzpatrick, Catholic Charities New Orleans, present, does not wish to speak. Jackson Voss is present and will provide information if requested. Terrence Ginn, CPEX, is present and support, does not wish to speak. Morgan Shannon is present in support, does not wish to speak. Tom Costanza, Louisiana Conference of Catholic Bishops, present in support, does not wish to speak. Kathy Wascom, Lean, present in support, does not wish to speak. Elizabeth Sochak, Climate Reality Project, New Orleans, present, in support, does not wish to speak. And we also have Lewis Wren, AFL-CIO, present in support, does not wish to speak. And Jack Reno Sweeney, Louisiana Bucket Brigade, present in support and does not wish to speak. All right, I have a note from, okay, I'll do that. All right. And those in opposition and wishing to speak, Robert Berg, Lamoga. Is Mr. Berg here? All right, come on up, please. Mr. Gregory Bowser, Louisiana Chemical Association. Mr. Bowser, y'all come up. Let me see if anybody else wishes to speak. I know we have a motion on the table for 3 minutes, but we only have a couple of people in opposition, and I think only to be fair to the people in opposition, we need to give them a little more time. So I'm going to move that we, remove that restriction, for at least these couple of speakers, because I only see a couple of other people here. Actually, I only see 2 that wish to speak. All right. Mr. Berg, if you will go forward with you, who wants to, I'll let y'all decide who wants to go first.
I'll go first, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much. Greg Bowser with Louisiana Chemical Association, and thank you for this opportunity. And as we talk about this bill, one of the things that we need to make note of is that there's currently monitoring going on today. Most of the facilities have monitoring today. And so what we're talking about and what the bill does differently is it wants you to set up a monitoring system that goes automatically to some place, either DEQ or some other place off-site. That is far different than what's going on today. And it's not a $17,000 monitoring system that we're talking about. So I think that's should be clear. The other part is that currently, recently, EPA has decided that they're going to require monitoring of some kind in all the permitting that they approve of that come to Louisiana with respect to industrial facilities. So the monitoring is going to happen. One of the concerns is that if you do, Louisiana has a monitoring system in place, is it going to be different than what the feds are going to require? And then you're going to have additional monitoring that goes above and beyond that. The other thing, when you look at some of the studies that have been done, Louisiana has reduced its air emissions, and people want to reduce it even more, and every day that's what we're working to do. So I think that the bill is something that's going to be costly to facilities, but the question is it going to give you the information you need to make the kind of decisions that we would have to make? And to just basically collect a bunch of data and dump it into the public and say, here you go, you decide what it means, I think it's going to mean different things to different people. So I think from that perspective, we need to take a long look at what we're doing and how we do that. So with that, I'll yield to Mr. Berg to talk about some of the technical aspects of the monitoring systems.
All right, thank you, Mr. Berg. If you please state your name.
Certainly. My name is Robert Berg, and I reside at 11757 Villa Avenue in South Baton Rouge. I'm here representing the Mid-Continent Oil and Gas Association. I'm a chemical engineer. I'm a licensed professional engineer in environmental. I've been doing environmental work for a little over 40 years, mostly in Louisiana, other than a couple of years in Texas. So I've worked on the Gulf Coast, and I've worked in most of the plants that are in question. There's been a lot of focus on a really kind of a single plant today, and I'm not here intending to talk about that plant. It does occur to me that we're focused on a single plant. This bill would apply to 531 other plants. So I'd like to focus on those instead. In a very timely fashion, I'm sure most of you know that Administrator Michael Regan visited Louisiana for his second visit to the river parishes. He visited on April the 6th, and he visited to announce the revisions that EPA was making to the hazardous organic NESHAP regulation, and that is the regulation that regulates air toxics from large chemical companies. In a very timely fashion. It came out in this morning's Federal Register. It's 126 pages. And rather than take my word for it, I'd like to read directly from his remarks at his press conference. And I'll quote, "Today I'm proud to announce that the EPA is building on our commitment and issuing a proposal that would reduce more than 6,000 tons of toxic air pollution per year and slash emissions of the highly toxic chemicals ethylene oxide, or ETO, and chloroprene. The proposed rule would also cut emissions of nearly 80 additional air toxics from plants that make synthetic and organic chemicals in other parts of the country. And to ensure that the 6 key air toxics stay below levels of concern where people live, EPA is proposing to require plants to monitor at their fence lines if they use, produce, store, or emit them. A first-of-its-kind community risk assessment determined that EPA's proposed rule for synthetic organic chemical manufacturers would dramatically reduce the numbers of people with elevated cancer risk from breathing air toxics. And in communities near chemical plants, the number of people with elevated risk would drop by 96% overall. This is not from me, this is from Administrator Regan. And I'll go on to have another quote that says, his quote said, the proposed rule will undoubtedly be a game changer. Okay, so we've been up here several times. It feels like more than 4 years, but we've been up here several times to say that this legislation is not needed, that monitoring can be required by the state agency, by the federal agency. They can certainly require this anytime they see a need. I would venture to say at this point that no plant in the country has ever been studied as thoroughly as the Dinka plant has been studied. And there were some issues found, and the issues are being addressed. I would say that we don't need this piece of legislation to apply to the other 531 sites that this would apply to. The cost would be between $1 and $2 million per site per year. So the fiscal note that keeps getting touted, the $17,000, that's the cost to DEQ to manage the data when it comes in. That is not the cost to the facilities to build and install and operate these monitors. I want to go back to this is notable because Dr. Trell really actually saved me a lot of time explaining exactly what this monitoring would require. It would require exactly what she suggested we needed. It would require tubes all the way around the perimeter of these large chemical plants, very similar to the monitoring that refineries have been doing now for several years for benzene. It sets action levels for these chemicals of concern. EPA, once again, opted not to use a real-time monitoring system similar to what Senator Fields has suggested. They said it doesn't get down to a low enough level to measure the health effects they're concerned with. They've opted to use these passive tubes that can go to a third-party laboratory that can be measured at very low concentrations. So we're going to be doing exactly what was suggested that needed to be done. The refineries are already doing it. Some of the larger facilities, they may have 15 or 20 or more of these all the way around the facility. So it doesn't matter which way the wind is blowing, we're going to always know if these constituents are coming from our plant sites. And the public will know because EPA is going to have a website available to the public and put that information out there as they currently do with the refinery benzene data so that that information is readily available to the public. And this measures long-term health effects of chemicals that EPA has deemed the chemicals that are at the highest level of concern for these near neighbor communities. So we're getting this. I mean, we're going to be doing really virtually everything that I think that the public wants. This is going to be monitored. It's going to be monitored for chemicals of concern. We're going to know what numbers to compare them to. EPA is establishing an action level that companies have to go out and look if they're above that action level and try to find the source of that benzene or whatever the other chemical might be. They have to go out and figure out where that is and fix it. And if they don't find it and fix it, then EPA is going to come pay them a visit. So I don't think we need this piece of legislation this year any more than we have in past years. I think we're going to get everything we want. When a problem's identified, it's being addressed appropriately. Industry will respond and do this monitoring as required.
Okay, thank you. Senator Duplessis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just have a follow-up question.
Certainly.
You mentioned proposed EPA regulations and Administrator Regan visiting and where we are right now. Are the proposed EPA regulations that you discuss, is that the reason why you say this legislation is not needed? Because you also said that this bill essentially was not needed because of other policies that are in place. And I believe you cited proposed EPA regulations.
Well, let me rewind, and I was in the interest of time because many of the committee members are the same that heard from me last year, so I was trying to be I'm never brief with my comments, but I was trying my best. We're doing a lot of monitoring of our plants. You heard one of the proponents of legislation talking about his process being monitored and being shut down if they had a release. All of our companies have that. They have continuous emission monitors. They're monitoring their process. Some of the larger facilities have really thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of permit requirements they have to prove that they're complying with, and if they're not, they have to report those to DEQ twice a year. Those go in. It's available to the public, semi-annual and annual reports for their Title V. All large facilities have to do that. The permit is designed to have the appropriate monitoring, record keeping, and reporting to ensure compliance. So we've got a lot of this out there already. I think what I've said in years past, and I'm continuing to say, is when the agency feels like we need to step up the effort a little bit,
Is this
then we're able to
LDEQ or
do that.
EPA? Which agency?
Well, in this case, it's EPA. But I will say, and DEQ folks are here, I mentioned last year, DEQ has $2.5 million mammal vans, that mobile air monitoring labs that can monitor at very low levels, and they can move those and deploy those and those vans, and they go into communities, and they've been doing that, been doing a campaign to go into communities where there's been a concern. And I think if you were to ask them up here, they'd tell you that they haven't found any areas of concern, and they've literally done a ring around southeast Louisiana. I think it's important. We've supported that effort. One of those vans was paid for by industry, and so DEQ is doing that. DEQ also has a full monitoring network, and they are supplementing that. They got some IRA money. They got some grant money from EPA, and they'll be adding 2 additional fixed monitors to the monitoring network they already have.
I just want to get to the proposed regulations you mentioned regarding EPA.
Yes.
And could you just elaborate on those a little bit? And what,
Well,
what they would do?
So that the regulations are consistent across the country, EPA is responsible for assessing the risk of, in a whole wide variety of industries, glass manufacturers, pulp and paper industry, the chemical industry, and they evaluate these on a periodic basis. They evaluate the risk. They look at the emissions from that particular industrial sector, and if any one plant is over the risk factor, 1 in 10,000 risk factor, then they write new regulations for everybody. And that's what has led to this. And so this is a regulation at the federal level that DEQ will then enforce because they're delegated the authority. But it's going to be the same for Louisiana, for Texas, for Oklahoma, for California. Everybody's going to end up with exactly the same regulations.
But they could be repealed, though, couldn't they?
By DEQ, by EPA.
By DEQ, no.
They can be repealed by the EPA.
By EPA.
EPA, I mean, I know President Biden just announced his reelection, but we can get a new administration in 2 years that could come right back and say, we're going to reverse course on those regulations.
So the Clean Air Act has a lot of anti-backsliding provisions in there, and then once a rule is final, it's not turned back.
Yeah, it's not likely to be repealed. You could say the same thing about this bill if it passes.
Well,
in a year.
But the reason I brought up the EPA and the proposed regulations was really to bring it back to the comment that this bill wasn't needed. So I agree with you. You can cite that for any piece of legislation or policy, but I don't think that we could cite any proposed regulations as a reason as to why this bill isn't needed today. That's the point that I wanted to make. But thank you for your comments. I appreciate you.
Certainly.
Thank you, Senator DePlessis. I guess, Mr. Berg, we have reporting requirements now. Is that correct? That would they have to fill them out?
So all the chemicals that are on the senator's list of chemicals were actually pulled largely from the Louisiana air toxics regulations, which I'll remind you are still one of the only state air toxic regulations in the country. And reportable quantities are set. They're periodically reviewed. The EPA's reportable quantities are reviewed, and we do report any releases over that reportable quantity to Senator Fessie's bill. We had the discussion about single point of contact. So that would go to the single point of contact, and so state police and DEQ would find out about that at the same time, allowing them to respond. I'm going to tell you, the best tool we have when we have an incident is those guys putting themselves out there, and I admire them for doing so, but the state police and DEQ emergency response folks going out with their handheld devices and getting between the community and the release and evaluating instantaneously with their handheld devices as to whether, because remind you, we can't order a shelter in place. We can't order an evacuation, a road closure. That all has to be done by state police on advice of DEQ. I would much rather leave the system the way it is so that folks aren't alarmed. And I mean, if they get 15 parts per billion coming across their phone of trimethyl chicken wire, I don't know whether to tell them whether that's a safe level or not. We've argued for 10 years as to what a safe level of ethylene oxide is. So we're going to be generating a lot of data that has a lot of potential to cause fear and or complacency, which in my opinion would be even worse. You know, the little boy that cried wolf, we cried too many times that I got a hit of this chemical and it's slightly below the action level and whatever that might be. I'd worry that we would be just bombarding these folks with data, and then when we do have a real event, they're not going to be ready for it. I'd much rather leave that in the hands of our professionals that study this and know how to do this.
All right. Thank you. We also have, is there anything else, gentlemen? All right. We also have Tommy Fauché from Lamoga is present in opposition but does not wish to speak. Jeff Cosby from ExxonMobil, present and in opposition and does not wish to speak. David Zeller, Baton Rouge Area Chamber, is present and in opposition but does not wish to speak. Lauren Hayden, LABI, is present in opposition and does not wish to speak. Sarah Goday, Rhodes, Hood, and Bauman, is present in opposition, does not wish to speak, and will provide information if requested. Ashley Kane, Lamoga, is present in opposition and does not wish to speak. Carson Delorve is Associated Builders and Contractors, is present in opposition and does not wish to speak. Matthew Spadley, American Sugarcane League, is present in opposition and does not wish to speak. And I think that brings up everybody. Senator Fields, if you're ready to close,
Yes,
we're
sir.
ready for you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. And I particularly want to thank each member because we've gone down this road before, and the patience of this committee has been just absolutely incredible. People have a right to know what they breathe, and that's the whole basis of the bill. I really wish you would favorably consider moving the bill out of the committee. I think it'll be a step in the right direction. The bill has a lot of hurdles to go, but I would just ask for your favorable consideration.
Thank you, Senator Fields. And what is the pleasure of the committee? Senator Duplessis moves favorable. Is there any opposition? I'm going to oppose it. I move to. I think the EPA needs to move this, so I'll oppose that motion. And move to defer the bill. Madam Secretary, if you can call the vote and ask the committee, just explain the vote to the committee.
Okay. Senator Price?
Are we voting on my motion to defer?
Substitute.
Substitute motion. Yeah, I did a substitute motion.
Okay. No.
I objected and moved right.
Senator Duplessis?
No.
Senator Hewitt? She's not here. Senator Lambert?
Yes.
Senator Pope?
No.
Senator Connick?
No.
Original motion.
Senator Duplessis moves to report the bill favorably. Madam Secretary, if you'll call the roll.
Senator Price? Yes. Senator Duplessis?
Yes.
Senator Lambert?
No.
Senator Pope?
Yes.
Senator Connick?
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members.
All right. Senate Bill 35 will be reported favorably.
What time are we going up for? 2 or 3?
3.
We didn't adjourn.
Huh?
We didn't adjourn.
Oh, is there a motion to adjourn?
Yes.
Senator Price moves to adjourn. And no opposition, we're adjourned.
Okay. Just go through it.
All right, 10 more hurdles to go. Or the one that I had out that was wrong.
Okay.